Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Knox County Democratic Party. I'm Michael Davis, and I'll be your host for today's program with Tennessee State Representatives Gloria Johnson and Mike Stewart as we discuss the recent legislative session, what you need to know about it, and the future issues for Democrats in the legislature. We're also looking forward to hearing about their campaigns for re-election and what they'd like to accomplish in the House with another term. Mike and Gloria, thank you so much for being here with us today, and welcome back to DTV.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It has been a while since we've had y'all on the show, so we're really happy to have you here to talk about what has been, as usual, a very eventful legislative session. We'll get into the details of the last legislative session in a moment, but in just a few words, how would each of you characterize the past session? Gloria, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say it was a session that benefited those at the top and corporate special interest. We didn't do a lot for hardworking Tennessee families. We have not expanded Medicaid. We didn't put the needed funds into public education, and we weren't able to raise the wage. And so we still have a lot to work on but we gave tax breaks, biggest tax breaks you've seen to FedEx, Wall Street and stockbrokers, but we didn't do much for Tennessee's working families.
Okay. Mike, how would you characterize this session?
I agree with everything that Representative Johnson said. She actually tweeted this morning, I saw a particularly poignant tweet talking about the billions of dollars we've lost with expansion and with our bad decision made over many years to not expand healthcare under President Obama's Affordable Care Act. That's just been a rolling disaster for the state of Tennessee, leading to hospital closures, leading to people falling out of the middle class because of medical problems. It's really political malpractice. You know, every Democrat is for expanding health care. We just have too many Republicans, and they have consistently blocked this obviously good policy that the vast majority of states, including states like Nebraska and Oklahoma, very red states, very Republican states, have adopted. Beyond that, I would also note the extraordinary event at the end of the session where the most restrictive anti-choice legislation in the United States was passed at 12:30 midnight in the Senate after everybody had been told it wasn't going to be brought up and at a time when the Capitol was effectively closed to the public. So extraordinarily bad government process led to extraordinarily bad legislation. Based on the Supreme Court's recent ruling, it's almost certainly unconstitutional, will be struck down, but it will be the law until it is struck down, and it's a huge burden on every family, and particularly every woman in the state of Tennessee, an incredible intrusion into their lives. So we didn't do a lot that was good. We did a lot that was bad, and I know you've got other things to talk about. We also, I think, didn't do enough to address the COVID-19 crisis. We left a lot of money in the rainy day fund, and that should be out on the streets, tracking and getting this virus under control.
Right. And on that note,
I'm sorry, I just really want to add a point with the heartbeat bill. Something that's not talked about as much that people really need to understand is an amendment that was put on that bill about the abortion pill that is a series of 2 pills. And this amendment required physicians to tell women after the first pill that they could reverse that procedure. But it is not a medically approved procedure. They actually did drug trials on this procedure, and multiple women were hemorrhaging. They had to be taken to the emergency room, and they stopped the drug trial saying that these drugs were damaging to women. And our legislature voted to do a procedure that has been medically deemed dangerous to women, and they approved it with very little discussion at, like Mike said, about 2 a.m.
Right. Let's stay with that topic for just a second, Gloria. Regarding this bill, as we talked about here, this happened during a suspended rule session. It was considered, even though it wasn't on the calendar. It was considered, even though the governor was not recommending it, as the Senate had promised they would not bring up if he was not. It was brought up at midnight in closed Capitol. This was a surprise to everyone when they woke up the next day that this even passed. what are you're on the record as you felt that your reproductive freedom, Gloria, was being used to bargain for budget passage. How did you see that bargaining playing out?
They literally bartered with women's health to get their budget passed because it was an amoral budget. A budget is a moral document, and what they were passing was not benefiting the majority of hardworking families in Tennessee. So in order to get it passed, they had to give something that some people wanted, which was women's reproductive rights. To me, it is about equality. And if you don't believe women have a right to autonomy of their body, then you don't believe women are equal. And we should be far past that, but sadly we are not.
What are some other details about this bill? Isn't it true that it has amendments that kick into effect if the 6-week ban is struck down, as it likely will, that it implements an 8-week ban, then 10-week, and then so on, and automatically adjusting, so to speak, amendments. Is that correct?
Let Mike speak to that if he would like to.
It's designed to impose the most restrictive standard on choice that the Supreme Court will allow. And so, these bills are crafted in Washington and then passed down through the Republican network. And this is designed essentially like a ratchet to make sure that Tennessee has the most heavy restrictions on choice that exist in the United States. Keying off something Representative Johnson said, I think you have to look at kind of the fact that this was passed in the way it was to kind of reflect, where the Republican majority is right now. We are not in a normal time. We are facing a pandemic which has millions of people out of work, which has disrupted people all across the state, which is threatening the lives of many people, and certainly of every senior, every person with a pre-existing condition in the state of Tennessee. So we're in this emergency situation, and the Republicans basically do very little about that emergency situation. They don't allow universal absentee voting. We have to use the courts to get that, even though it's self-evident that it's essential to the safety of the public. We don't really, even today, direct that the governor come up with a coherent plan for tracking and this disease and getting it under control. Basically, we take only the most kind of half-hearted measures to dealing with COVID-19. And all we do instead is go back to the, old Republican playbook that, someone could have grabbed off a table in 1982. You know what I mean? They're just still completely focused on the social agenda of their far right primary voters, and that's not good unto itself. But the fact that they're focusing on that and not addressing this critical problem, it's just extraordinarily bad government. And at some point, people in Tennessee just have to ask themselves, has this legislature, this Republican majority, just become too much of a burden? Again, as Gloria's pointed out over and over again, when we're talking not expanding healthcare, we're talking about billions of dollars lost, hospitals closed. It's a massive burden on our state. And, how much longer are the people going to tolerate such bad stewardship by the majority?
And that brings up a very interesting question for both of y'all. When you meet constituents, when you hear from everyday people, are their values, are their desires for what kind of legislation they want to see matching up with the Republicans that are actually in office right now? Is there a gap or a gulf there between them, or are they really representing the people? And if there is that gap or gulf, what can we do to change that?
I think it's all about getting our message out there, and we've got to do better at getting the message out. We're not on the doors because of COVID, which is really weird for me at this time. Usually everything's on the doors. We're doing a lot of personal phone calls, and the conversations are still similar. But what I try to tell people, because my opponents will paint me as this extreme whatever, but the hilarious thing is all of the legislation I brought is supported by the majority of Tennesseans of both parties. Medicaid expansion, fully funding public education, making sure that we have enough social workers and guidance counselors and teachers, and raising teachers' pay, and raising the wage, and criminal justice reform. That's something, and medical marijuana. Those are all things that the vast majority of Tennesseans want on both sides of the aisle. So the extremists are those folks on the other side of the aisle who were doing these open carry and, banning abortion, those kinds of things. Those are the people who are extreme and out of step with the people. Because the polls show over and over that the people want Medicaid expansion. They love their public schools, and they want to honor them and invest in them. And they believe that people who work hard for a living should earn a living wage. We are with the majority of Tennesseans.
Well, and sometimes those messages do get out there and they do work. You witness vouchers. The Republicans have never been able to pass a constitutional school voucher bill. They have to keep whittling it down. This last one applied just to Nashville and Memphis, even though they knew that would almost certainly mean the bill would get thrown out. And the reason is because they couldn't get the votes for a better bill. So, there's an example where messaging, getting the message out, people got it and they recognize that that's a bad policy and they're not for it. And therefore, they haven't been able to get the votes together for it. But Gloria is right. We need to expand that to where people recognize that the whole Republican enterprise right now is just not serving anybody with a normal life in the state of Tennessee. And like she's ticked off, everything from expansion, medical marijuana. These are things that almost everybody agrees with. Up to now, we've not yet got the majority of people in Tennessee or in many Tennessee districts to recognize that by changing their state legislature, they can very quickly hasten those changes they want to see in their state.
Just a quick question about the last day of the most recent closing of the legislative session. It lasted till early in the morning, finally adjourning at about 3 a.m. Can you describe the scenes of that day and some of the events that led to such a marathon day of voting?
Well, that's a lot of hurry up and wait, actually, because we're waiting on conference committees to finish and things like that. So a lot of times you're just, sitting around talking, waiting for those conference committees to end and for the bill to come back. But, we got thrown some curves of things that we didn't think. I remember we were on a break and I was sitting in Representative Clemens' office and we were hearing that the heartbeat bill's coming up. And that's when it hit me. It's like, they're using my reproductive rights to bargain this budget. And I just was flabbergasted. And then again, when the phase-in amendment came onto the heartbeat bill, again, flabbergasted. And to watch them not hear bills because they had amendments about police brutality on them. They really showed a lot of their colors in the last couple of days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that's true in the budget, where in the budget, they basically did nothing for families in the state of Tennessee at all, other than, I guess, keeping the government, functional. I mean, we kept over $1 billion in our rainy day funds and associated funds at a time where in many counties in Tennessee, you have vast unemployment, at a time when we have this virus raging through our communities. It reminds me a little bit of our tepid opioid response, where opioids were destroying the state, really, many counties in the state. And my view was we always responded to it in very minimal ways with half measures. I think we can do a lot better for our state. We could be dynamically responding to COVID-19. We could be leading the country in terms of getting that under control and getting our economy open in a permanent fashion. And instead, we're just kind of kicking the can down the road. It's a huge disappointment. Frankly, I don't remember in the last 2 or 3 days having a substantive discussion about what we could do. And I wonder if Gloria had this and I just wasn't there, but I don't remember a substantive discussion with Republicans about policies we could enact to address this catastrophic virus that is killing people all across our state and destroying our economy. What sort of government is that, where you've got this incredible pressing immediate problem and everybody's walking around like it doesn't exist? It's extraordinary. And, we still have people. I was there among the last days of the session. We still had Republican members likening COVID-19 to the flu, something that every expert in the United States knows is completely inaccurate. So, that I think was the most disappointing aspect of the last days to me, was, other than the heartbeat bill, was the just lack of focus on this emergency. To me, I grew up at a time when America would put people on the moon. No other country could do it. When we had an emergency, we responded dynamically, and we were the leading country in the world. Instead, we're sitting here acting like we can't do anything about this virus that's raging, even though countries like Iceland have got it under control. Anyway, I think we could have done a lot better for the state of Tennessee, but instead we just went back to the tired old Republican playbook of, unneeded gun legislation, unneeded abortion legislation. I mean, basically, you just could have gone up to the Heritage Foundation or any conservative website and just tapped out these bills that the Republicans were pushing for their fringe base.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, when we recessed in March, the idea was to, have a stay at home so we could get a strategy to attack this virus. And during that time, we did none of that. We didn't get a crack contact tracing strategy started. We didn't get rapid testing. There are so many things that we didn't do, and they opened up based on a date and not based on data. And so when we go into the budget, as Mike says, we've got $1 billion in the rainy day fund, but I'm not even talking. Our amendments that we had on the floor, we're not even talking about taking from the rainy day fund. We were talking about not putting in the $325 million they're getting ready to put in, and then another few months down the road, another 200. We're going to be adding in the next few months more than $500 million to the rainy day fund. How come we couldn't have done what one of our members asked, which was take $150,000 and at least give a cost of living raise to teachers and state employees like the governor and the judges got? Or I had an amendment to take $115,000 that was already allotted unused in the budget for teacher raises and to get our schools ready for COVID. And they voted those down. So every time we tried to bring up the discussion, it was voted down. But we kept in a $49 million tax cut for Wall Street and stockbrokers. We kept in a $21 million tax break for FedEx, who got billions in tax breaks from the feds. We don't have anything for Tennessee's hardworking folks, and that's just wrong.
Oh, and it's again, I mean, and look at what Representative Johnson just said was true a month ago or 2.5 weeks ago when we got out. Think how true it is now. Like, how much more do we need her proposals to get the schools ready for a COVID environment? I mean, now COVID's blasting through the roof again, and we're completely caught flat-footed. I mean, to this day, our Department of Health does not have a written plan for tracking COVID-19. They will literally admit that. It's one of the great mysteries of public policy in the state of Texas. And broader failure by the Lee administration and the Republicans in the legislature to take this crisis seriously and to dynamically respond to it. We should be responding to COVID-19 like we respond to a war, which is you line up all your resources and you harness the state to getting this done. And instead, we're addressing it in the most with half measures, and that's just sad. It's disappointing. I don't even think the kind of stuff, the kind of proposals that Representative Johnson's talking about, they should just be bipartisan. They should just be a no-brainer. We should be arguing about the details of preparing our schools for COVID, not the concept. But that's where we are right now in the state of Tennessee. It's, basically, I always say the state of Tennessee has so much going for it, it masks the bad governance. We have so many positive aspects to our state, from tourism to our cultural dominance to all these great businesses to all the great people, that it makes it hard to see how bad some of these decisions are, because the overall story remains in many cases positive. Of course, if you show up at Jamestown Hospital and it's closed and you just got bit by a copperhead, okay, suddenly you see in high relief what bad governance does for you. And over time, it slowly makes people's lives decline in quality. And that's the opposite of what government should be doing.
Right. It really highlights how undeserved this kind of government is for such a great state that we all love and hope will do better. Along those lines, there seems to be lots of things, that denial of COVID, denial of climate change, denial of the prosperity of the middle class nowadays in our state, that lines up with a lot of other headline issues. Similarly, the exposure of systemic racism and its effects on people of color has exploded this year. It's brought about a political and social climate that we haven't seen in perhaps decades. Do you think that Tennessee lawmakers are willing to acknowledge this, and are they acting in a way that's significant to improve racial inequality in Tennessee?
They say a few words, but I would not say that they are acting. We tried multiple times to bring up issues on the House floor, and were either called out of order or tamped down. And just in these last few weeks in committees and things, we heard some of the most racist language I've heard in a long time, with statements like, one of our black representatives was talking, he was trying to get a Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe. Or another representative talking about, well, we might all be slaves one day. I mean, it's remarkable, the things that I was hearing, and very disappointing. And I saw a will of some people to talk about it, but I saw no will for action. I don't know, Representative Stewart, if you felt differently than that, or.
The only thing I'll say is the removal, or the beginning of the process to remove the Nathan Bedford Forrest bust, I hope shows the future, which is to say, for years, people have blocked that removal. For years, Democrats have pushed every way we know how to get that thing out of there. Mm-hmm. Today, we saw the Capitol Commission vote to remove it after great public pressure, after Democrats bringing this issue up every conceivable way we knew how. And so my hope is, even though that's a bust, my hope is that playbook of constant public pressure combined with constant action on the part of Democrats will yield more real change. And it may not be at the level people want initially, but my hope is we get real social change of the sort that people are crying out for. And some of it may come in surprising ways, administrative decisions, rather than statutes passed. But my hope is, even though Representative Johnson's right, we were blocked at every turn, but I'm hopeful that as we come back into session, we're going to start to see some of that ice melt, and that we'll actually start to see some significant reform. This year, the Republicans passed school zone legislation that was a Democratic priority for years and years and years. Well, it's finally going to be law. For the sponsors, it's frustrating to have your bills hijacked by the Republicans, but still, it's good social change, and it will make our criminal justice system more just, more fair. So I'm hopeful we'll see more of that, and that we'll see some significant change on some of these issues, particularly issues people are crying out about the relationship between police and citizens, and those sorts of issues that have come up since the killing of George Floyd in particular.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
definitely hopeful too, and I really think that we need to keep that pressure on the the protesters. They're getting their message out, and some people might say they don't like it, but I think it's this country started on protest, and I think that we need to continue the protesting, the peaceful protests. The people's voices matter, and it can bring change.
Okay. Well, we just have a few minutes left. Real briefly, what are some of the bills that each of you are working on for the next session?
Well, I'm going to continue pushing paid family leave, because that is something that I believe that another bill that I didn't talk about earlier, that the majority of Tennesseans want and need desperately, to take time off to have a baby, to take time off to care for an aging parent or an ill family member, or yourself if you get a serious disease. And my plan does not cost the state a penny. It doesn't cost businesses a penny. It's paid for by the employee. The cost of about a cup of coffee a week, about $3 a week. And we can get a sort of an insurance program so that people can have 12 weeks off of paid family leave when they need it most.
Yeah, I think a bill I'm going to really focus on, I'll certainly take aspects of it, is the George Floyd Act that we had been working on. And it was not my idea. I have to give credit to Representative Powell and others who really focused on this. But it's an effort to enact 8 Can't Wait, which are a series of reforms to make it almost impossible or make it very difficult for people to be killed like George Floyd was killed, with excessive force, excessive violence, in that case, criminal violence. But we all know examples that don't rise to that level, but that are still atrocious and unacceptable. In any case, I believe there's a lot of room to get that legislation passed. And so that's one of the things that I'll be focused on. I suspect many other Democrats will be focused on as well.
Okay. Well, I know that both of y'all are very busy with your campaigns. Both of you are up for re-election this year. The primary is on August 6th. We'd like to remind any viewers out there that mail-in voting is available for all Tennessee voters except for first-time voters, as I understand. So if you want to get if you want to request your ballot, be sure to do that before July 30th. We'd like to thank our guests today, Gloria Johnson and Mike Stewart, representatives in the Tennessee State House. And this brings us to the end of another episode of DTV. We thank y'all so much for being here with us today. It's always a pleasure to speak with both of you.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, as always, to Doug Veum and the Knox County Democratic Party DTV Committee for arranging and producing the show. And thanks, of course, to all of our viewers. I'm Michael Davis, and thank you very much for watching DTV.